Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. Your financial advisor and Focus Financial are pleased to have Adam Moseley, Director of Technology, Operations, and Cybersecurity Consulting for Charles Schwab, as our special guest. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so today Adam will inform us of simple ways we can protect ourselves, our families, and our businesses from cybercrime. I'm Sarah Amundsen, VP of Marketing for Focus Financial, and I will be your host. Before I introduce Adam, a few housekeeping details. I need to let you know we are recording this webinar and it will be available for replay after our session. We encourage you to ask questions, so please enter them in the Q&A box and we will be addressing them throughout our time today. And now I'm pleased to introduce Adam Moseley. Adam is a National Director of Technology, Operations, and Cybersecurity Consulting for Charles Schwab. Adam consults with advisors and is responsible for Schwab's technology consulting team nationwide. This team provides hands-on guidance and consulting support to help investment advisors. The technology consultants help firms like ours keep strong cybersecurity practices and leveraging technology to best serve our clients. Adam has been with Schwab since 1997. Welcome back, Adam. Thanks for being with us today.
And Sarah, thank you. And thanks to the team there at Focus Financial for having me on with your clients on a topic that we know is so incredibly important and during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, no less. So kudos to all of you on that. And it's very exciting to see nearly 100 of your clients assembled on the line today. I'm excited to get into the discussion that we'll have with one another. Our opportunity and time together, I would say, is unique. Rather than a presentation today, we have an opportunity to hear what's on your minds. And I think through the Q&A feature, if I'm right, Sarah, we'll have the opportunity to take your questions. So I want to encourage you not to hold back, to share what's on your minds, to ask what questions you have, and we will do our very best to get through as many of the questions that you have for us today. In addition to leading the team that I do at Schwab, I have an interesting role. I'm a spokesperson for the topic, or on the topic, I should say, of cybersecurity for what is our advisor services business. And I also sit on an internal corporate level advisory board at Schwab that's designed to help our own firm be better at protecting the data that you and your advisors share with us each and every day. So it gives me a very interesting perspective and view of the cybersecurity landscape, and I'm excited to share what we're seeing out there. I'm even more excited to share how you can prevent the types of cybercrime and fraud that we see in our business. And make no mistake, no matter where you are in the continuum of cybersecurity defense, you will leave here today a little bit better. You will leave here today knowing a little bit more, or maybe knowing a little bit more about something than you did coming in on that one. What we have to share, I'm going to tell you, it's universal in nature. It's as good for those of you running small businesses as it is for those of you managing cybersecurity for your household. So as you learn something today, take it down or listen to the recording and share it with those around you in your community. And I'm excited to get into what I consider to be very actionable and very practical guidance that we can share along those lines. So Sarah, back to you, and let's hear what's on folks' minds.
All right. Our first question is from John. He's asking, what are you and other cybersecurity professionals seeing thieves do differently today to steal information? Are they becoming more sophisticated, and what can we do about it?
They are, in fact, and it's a great question to get us started. So thank you very much, John. I would say that we've seen a remarkable evolution in the type and the degree of sophistication that's used by cyber criminals. I'm going to call them bad actors for the rest of the day, though maybe I'll bounce around a little bit. But in terms of what we're seeing, the level of sophistication has increased. And maybe I'll help you make sense of that. These bad actors, they've been studying us, they've been studying our behaviors, and they've had a lot of time and a lot of resources to do it. In fact, I've heard that the cybercrime trade, if you will, eclipsed the drug trade in terms of revenue and profitability quite some time ago, actually many, many years ago. The bad actors, as I said, they've been studying our behaviors. They know exactly what buttons to press. They know exactly how to get us to take action, and they've been using that to get us to do things. So we'll talk about different types of fraud that we see in our business a little bit later. I'm certain of that, but make no mistake, they've evolved quite a bit. It used to be that you could spot a cyber crime type of event a mile away, and those days are long gone. Whether it's through a communication that is sent to us, whether it's through a contact that might be through social media, even over the phone or regular way mail. These are all different methods that we're seeing, cyber criminals use to try to attack us. Another big evolution, and we'll get this out of the way now because it's certainly not the topic I would want to end our call on. We are seeing senior investors in particular be targeted. We think of them as senior or maybe otherwise vulnerable investors, but be advised the bad actors are deliberately targeting these types of individuals. They're looking to take advantage of them. Most often that comes over email. So we'll talk about ways to prevent that in a little bit. But one of the most important things that each and every one of us can do for ourselves and for those in our family is simply be aware of that. If you're aware, you'll be a little more suspect of what comes over the wire or maybe with that next phone call that comes in. So just know that if you're a little more suspect, you'll leave just a little bit of time for your instinct to kick in, and that far and away is going to be your best cyber defense mechanism on that one. So I'll pause there, though. I feel like, Sarah, I could probably spend the rest of the calls talking on that topic, but yeah, let's keep going and see what's on folks' minds. So thanks, John, for getting us started.
Ephraim asks, I received a notification from a monitoring company that my personal data, including social security number, is located on the dark web. What is your recommendation?
Yeah, I like this one. Thank you, Ephraim. I have accepted the fact that my information too is on the dark web. It's actually not a bad way to operate, just assuming that that information is out there. There have been so many different data breaches by so many big companies over the years that it's likely that each and every one of us and everyone we know, our information is out on the dark web. By the way, just for matter of definition, the dark web is a special corner of the internet where bad actors buy and sell information, like our personal information. They buy and sell services and things like that. And if you go into it thinking that you've already been subject to a data breach, your information is most likely out there, then it leads to the question of, well, what do we do about that? So I want to talk about that. And then I want to come back to, Sarah, please don't let me forget what to do with that communication that Ephraim got, because I'm going to tell you it's suspect on that one. But back to assuming our information is out on the dark web, what do you do about that? Personally, I'm a big fan of taking precautions wherever I can. We'll talk about some of those best practices today, but one of them is securing your information. And one of the best ways you can do that is just by securing or freezing your credit. Now, this is easily done. And by the way, at no cost whatsoever, which each of the credit reporting agencies, that's TransUnion, that's Experian, and that's Equifax. And there are ways on each of those platforms to go in to create a profile, and then you can freeze your credit. Now, be advised, there are ways that those companies might try to take you through a path where you pay for that locking of your credit, but you don't have to pay for it. To put a freeze on your credit is free. And what's great about that is that if someone tries to take your information and they try to open an account with it, usually what happens with that bank or car dealership or whatever, a credit report's run, and well, it won't go through because your information's been frozen. So that's how you'll take care of that. Also, too, for the opening of checking and saving accounts under our names, there's a separate service, not the credit bureaus, but a separate service that's done. It's a service called Chex Systems, CHEX, and then the word systems. You can go to that website and you can put a freeze on that information as well. So that'll keep both credit accounts from being opened and then also checking and saving accounts being open. Now, Ephraim, back to your opening question. I don't know how that communication was received. I'm going to assume it was over email, but you should be very suspect of that. And what that means is, under no circumstances should you click on anything in that email. You should treat it if it's guilty, because the bad actors, for some time, know that they can send us information that we might feel encouraged or invited to click on, or maybe it's an attachment they want us to open, or maybe they just want us to reply, with sensitive information and whatnot. So in this case, if there's a question, you could close down that email and then go the path that I had mentioned in terms of securing your information. But I would not use that email as the launching point to go into whatever that service or whoever that provider is that was bringing that to your attention.
So kind of staying on that subject of compromised data, we've had a couple questions of the dark web.
Yep.
And what if it's compromised? Do you recommend changing your information, your email, your phone number, any of those kind of tactics?
To a degree, it's really difficult to start changing email and phone numbers, and you think about how you use that type of information to access different systems, how your banks and brokerage accounts, and how all of that is, seemingly tied to email. So that becomes difficult. But here's what I do recommend: if you ever think your information has been compromised, and by the way, when there are these big breaches that we've all been subject to, in many of those cases, our user IDs and our passwords are among the information that has been compromised. Now, in that situation, and it's actually good to assume this, even if your user ID and password wasn't among the data that was exfiltrated or was where there was subject to a breach. In that case, that is a time when you want to go out and change your password. So maybe we'll talk, Sarah, for a minute about password best practices and how to think about that. As you think about passwords, it's important that two criteria are met. Now, I'm talking about passwords at the very least for your sensitive accounts. I will tell you what I'm about to share with you. I've adopted wholesale across any account that I have. And that is one, that my password is long. My passwords are about 15 characters these days, 12 to 15, let's say. So let that be a standard. The longer the password, the better. The password. It actually not even need to be that complicated. It can be a collection of words that are meaningful to you, but indecipherable to somebody else. You can think of a passphrase, actually. Sometimes that's a better way to think about it. Think of it as a passphrase. But you bring together a collection of words, delete the spaces, you've easily got a 12 to 15 character password. Where this is important is the bad actors have technology that allows them to take a password and try to or take a user ID and try to brute force guess what the password might be, because we all have certain behaviors, and it's in some cases not difficult to guess our passwords. The longer the password, the more difficult it is to crack. So that's why you want to do that. Now, the other key criteria is that you want your passwords to be unique. Now, that means you don't share them across other online accounts, meaning what you use for your bank account is what you use for your bank account, and that's it. Your brokerage account's different. Your mortgage provider is different. Your email is different. Every password is unique. Now, where this is important, and we'll go back to that data breach example, is that if a user ID and password is amongst the data that's exfiltrated in a breach, what the bad actors do is they go sell and then buy that information out on the dark web. The bad actors will plug that into technology that will instantly go out using that same user ID and password, and they'll try to get into any online account that they have to gather more information or to conduct fraudulent transactions on your behalf. This type of cyber event is what's called a credential replay in our business. They're just reusing that user ID and password over and over and over again, trying to get into an account where they can, on that. A fun stat, and then I'll turn it back to you, Sarah, that I'd like to share, is that we, for years, have been tracking these credential replays on our own platform. We can tell when we're under a credential replay event. It could be how quickly a user ID and password is entered into our system, from where in the globe, whether we can see it or not, whether that is consistent with the type of behavior by that user, and many, many other things. We have counted now well over 1 billion attempts on our own websites alone on these credential replays. So that just gives you a taste of how common this one is and how important it is to use a unique password. And let me go one step further on this, and then we'll kind of round out password best practices, Sarah. coupled with your password, anywhere you can, you should be using two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Now that means in addition to your user ID and password, you're using whatever other multi-factor is available to you. That could be a code that's generated out of an app that you use with that provider. It could be a text message that's sent to you from that phone that gives you a PIN. It could be that that provider recognizes the computer you're logging in from is one that you've logged in from before. Those are all different forms of multi-factor. You just need to turn these on, and you can turn on multi-factor authentication in the security settings of any platform you're working with, whether it's your Schwab account, your bank account, whether it's your email account, or your portal that you're using. That's where you would enable all that.
A few people, speaking of passwords, have asked about password keepers.
Yeah.
There's a question on, Apple versus Android, or even, a Safari generated keeper.
Sure.
Or what keepers would you recommend are strong and maybe wouldn't be likely to be hacked?
Whether it's a password keeper or password manager, I do advocate for these technologies. I like them because it takes all of us out of the business of trying to remember our passwords. And I let go of trying to remember my passwords a long time ago. And now as a result, my passwords are far more complex than they ever have been. And that's better. That's better for everyone. Also, too, these password managers, and I will get into naming a few, they are far better, in my opinion, just my personal opinion, at protecting this data than any one of us. They are actually, sometimes I think that password managers are in the business of protecting data more than they are creating a password manager function. But what these tools are all very good at is they gave us a secure way to store them. All the information is encrypted. They can help us create new passwords. There's usually a function that will help you create a new password. They police our passwords. So if I'm naughty and I'm reusing a password, it'll alert me to that. I appreciate that function. If one of the providers that I'm using has had a compromise or a breach, well, my password manager tells me that. So for all of those reasons, I really appreciate using a password manager. A couple things that are really important, though, if you're going to use a password manager, it is a big leap of faith to go from whatever format you have now into putting it's a lot of eggs in one basket, I should say, right? So you're going to, a big leap of faith if you're going to go put all of those passwords in password managers. So you need to be very good about how you secure that. You want to make sure that you use multi-factor. You want to make sure you're using a unique password. You might want to have a pass sentence, not just a pass phrase, but a pass sentence to get into that application. Like, be really smart and really diligent about it. But what I like about password managers too is that there might be some applications or utilities where you want to share some, but not all of that information with your family. And they provide for that. There's great tools for that. So on the whole, I'm a big fan of password managers. Some big names out there in this space. This is not a recommendation. These are considerations. All of these are very good. There's a platform called One. That's the number one, and then Password. It does a fine job. It's great. It's been around forever. LastPass is another very popular password manager. Dashlane is another. And then we have the ones that are supported by Google and Apple, and that was part of the question there as well. And I'm going to maybe enlighten your group a little bit, Sarah, on the debate on should you use a password manager or should you use what Google and Apple make available through their browsers. A lot of security experts would say you should use a password manager and not use the browser, and that's not a bad path at all. I actually like using the browser. I have Safari generate my passwords on my Apple devices. They're stored in what's called iCloud Keychain. And the beauty of that is it makes it near seamless to use that on any Apple device that I have. But I'm also very good at how I secure that information and how I protect my devices and how I protect even my computer. I keep these things updated with software and security patches. I keep them locked down. They're all protected with user IDs and passwords and biometrics. And so for that reason, I feel really good about using that technology there. most security experts would rather see you in a password manager, though, to be clear on that.
Versus your notepad, for example.
Oh, I would say a password manager versus using like the Google browser to store or to generate a password. Many security experts prefer to see in an independent application like that. And those two, by the way, they can be shared across all the devices you have. So if you've got an iPhone and an iPad and a MacBook Air, and they can all be in synchronization with one another, as they're using those password managers.
So kind of maybe staying on the same vein a little bit, Victoria wants to know about security, LifeLock, for
Yeah.
example, and I think we've had a few others talking about more of your security for your
Yep.
computer and your devices.
Yep. So we get the question often about these providers, LifeLock among them, Aura, AURA is another. What these platforms have in common is they have the ability to go out and scour the dark web and let you know if your information's out there. They can step in, take you off of mailing lists. They can step in and freeze your credit for you, and then alert you in the event there's a credit attempt or run, on your account. And then I think some of them too, LifeLock among them, offer some insurance. So in the event of a compromise, an identity theft situation, they can step in and help you. Now, I'm unclear on that process and exactly what that entails, but I used to be a LifeLock member, and I thought it was great. I really appreciated the service that they offered. A lot of the things that I've mentioned today, whether it's seeing if your information's out on the dark web or freezing your credit, those are things you can do yourself. But for whatever LifeLock's fee is, they can do that for you. So I do like that. It saves a few steps. I advocate for I should say most proactive approaches to managing one's information and security. So I would say, yeah, I'm all for Aura and LifeLock. For those who may not want to have to afford that, just know that you can go in and you can do a lot of that stuff yourself. And going in and freezing your credit, for example, I recently walked my own mother through this, by the way, and we had it done together in maybe 45 minutes, and we were good to go. And so think about that. But those providers are all great in their own right.
Okay. Richard wants to know, if I sign up for a VPN, what extra hassles should I expect in my internet use?
You got it. So let's talk about. I'm gonna start somewhere else and end on Richard's question. How about that? So where I want to go first is, should you or shouldn't you use public Wi-Fi? This is what will lead us into the VPN discussion. So let me start there, and then Richard, I'll get to your question. We get the question often, and that is, should you or should you not use public Wi-Fi? So think what you have at a hotel or Starbucks or Panera or wherever that might be. Should you use that Wi-Fi that's made available? The answer is no. You should do what you can to stay off of that. I'll explain why, and then we'll keep going with it. With those public Wi-Fis, unless you really know what you're doing, it's tough to know for sure how good the security is on that public Wi-Fi network. So you're just best to stay off of it. A bad actor who's in the right place at the right time with the right type of technology, there's an opportunity they can see everything that you're doing when you're on that public Wi-Fi. It's also really easy for a bad actor who's in the right place at the right time with the right technology to launch their own Wi-Fi network, and they could call it Panera 2 or Starbucks 2, and you wouldn't know the difference. I wouldn't know the difference, not without poking around quite a bit. And there too, if we're on their Wi-Fi network, bad actor, well, then they may have the ability to see everything that we're doing on there. I mean, down to the individual keystroke. So it's best to stay off of public Wi-Fi where you can. Use cellular everywhere it's made available. Now, if you're in a pinch, because there are plenty of places cellular is not going to be available, a cruise ship, an airplane are two very good examples. Or if you're just somewhere in the Wi-Fi or the cellular is really bad, maybe you're deep in a conference center at a hotel. Well, what do? This is where VPNs come in. Now, VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It's an app that you can buy in the various app exchanges. its purpose is when you're on a network or a Wi-Fi network to secure your communication. It actually encrypts it. It encrypts it to a point where it's almost not worth the bad actor's time to try to deal with you, and they try to just go on to the next person. So we love the idea of the use of the VPN. You can use them at home if you want to, though it's not as necessary. You can also use them, of course, when you're traveling and about. The typical VPN is probably $5 to $8 a month. And currently, I bounced around. I tried different VPNs on my phones. I'm using one called Nord right now. It's a very popular brand, Nord, Nord. I've used Hotspot Shield before. Some of you running antivirus, they may come with VPNs. I know Symantec is in this business, and there's many others. When you're looking for a VPN, just look for one that is very highly rated. You're looking at 4.5 stars, and that's really widely adopted. You do that, you'll be in good shape, and expect to pay $5 or $6 a month. Now, back to Richard's question. I've experienced little to no downside in using a VPN. Every so often, maybe there's a little bit of performance degradation as it masks that communication and encrypts it. But by and large, they're really good, and they're really fast. In fact, in more cases than not, it's hard for me to even know whether I even have the VPN turned on. Speaking of performance, like it's really that good. So I've noticed little to no downside at all. Maybe one hang up, there might be some websites that you work with that don't like VPNs because they want to know who you are, where you're coming in from. They want to see your IP address. I'm getting a little technical here, but that might make it a little difficult to get into those websites, but that's not a wholesale thing. It's going to be much more, selective.
We have a few asking, Brad wants to know if there's a cyber attack that compromises assets in Schwab brokerage. Is there coverage to provide recovery?
Well, thank you. There is. So and this is something I encourage everyone to know about. Whether you work with Schwab or whoever it is you work with, understand what that coverage looks like. There's an area on our website on schwab.com. It's known as Schwab Safe. So if you went to schwab.com and you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a link to Schwab Safe. And you can click on that link from within our website, and then you can read about it. And it talks about the Schwab security guarantee. And what that does is it protects your clients, protects any Schwab client from unauthorized access in your account. And the type of scenario that Brad had asked about, that would, in my opinion, constitute as unauthorized access. Things that may not constitute as unauthorized access is if you give your credentials, your user ID and password to somebody, and they log in as you. Well, you've in fact given them access to your account, and then by doing so, you would have authorized them. That's how that is understood. But when we're talking about the cyber attacks that Brad had mentioned, we have protections in place for that, very specifically the Schwab security guarantee. Beyond that, there are all sorts of things that we're doing with respect to our infrastructure, how it's hardened, how we work to keep people out of that infrastructure very, very hard through our cyber defenses. And that's how we prevent those types of things from happening. But in the event it does, that's where the Schwab security guarantee kicks in.
Okay, there was a couple Schwab related. I think you covered those.
Yeah.
Now there's a few people asking about home title theft.
Oh, yeah.
Anita wants to know, people are able to steal the deed to your house. Is that true? And is there home title theft protection worth insurance, worth getting?
Okay, yeah, it's terrible. I learned of this maybe 6 months ago. I got an email from the village that I'm a part of here in Northern Illinois, and they talked about this. And at the time, I didn't know that there was insurance to cover this sort of thing. So I'm not well versed on insurance, but I did immediately sign up for a service, and it was through the municipality here, through the records department in our village. And anytime there was anything happening with the documents, title, and whatnot, deed associated with my house, I get an alert on that. So I have done that. That is a preventative measure that I've taken, and I would advocate for that. I don't know how common it is what we're talking about here, but we're talking about in many cases what constitutes the most largest or the largest asset that some of us have, and that's our real estate. So I think it is important to take those protections. I'm just not familiar with the insurance or the need for it, but coordinating with your that title department or whoever it is within your community that has access to that so that you can sign up for these types of alerts, I think is a good idea.
We are too getting questions. So similar to cameras and apps and fridges, for example. So many things
Yeah.
can connect to the internet these days. How secure are those connections connected via my wireless router and view on my phone?
Yeah, I think we're talking about some of the smart appliances that we're all running these days. And yeah, if you think about them, you do a little bit of an inventory throughout your house. There's quite a few. You know, the most obvious, I think, in some cases, is I have to say it quietly because she's in the other room, Alexa, right? Who is listening to every single thing that we say there. Um, Personally, I've just, in fact, she heard me. She's actually listening right now. Personally, I've just accepted that, and I don't have concerns, about that. Though, I am careful. I would say I probably wouldn't have sharing a lot of really sensitive information with Alexa. Just maybe just as good cyber hygiene. But it's also when you think of that one in particular, I don't know that you can get more commercial or institutional or industrial grade than Amazon, in that case. So that gives me some comfort there. So I am thoughtful about what sort of things I hook up. In a Wi-Fi sense, I tend to use big known name companies. The security cameras that I use that also connect to my Wi-Fi, well, those are straight from Amazon. I think it's Blink. There's a couple different companies they have, but yeah, that gives me some comfort there too, because I know I'm working with a provider who I believe knows what they're doing, on that one. And I'll just a couple other things. I think I'm good about keeping things updated in my home. So whether it's the firmware that's on my router, I'm careful with that. I keep devices updated. I make sure that those types of things are enabled. So those also give me some degree of comfort there too, Sarah.
We have a few questions on online shopping and protecting your credit cards and your data online in that respect. Is PayPal safe? And how do you protect your credit cards?
All right. Um, Online shopping seems to be, I was going to say the way of the future. It's actually the way of the present. It's
Yeah.
how it happens. But I do have an opinion, on that. And when I'm doing online shopping, I tend to do it with companies that I know and trust. So there too, I like the terms commercial grade, institutional grade. I'm not out there looking for the best price in maybe some fly by night retailer that may not even be headquartered in the continental United States, right? I'm thoughtful about where I make my purchases there, so that gives me some comfort there. When I'm shopping online too, I'm making sure that the browser I'm in has that little padlock at the top that shows that you're in this. I'm talking about in the address bar, at the top that shows that you're on a secure encrypted website. So that's important as well. There was a question about PayPal. I mean, I don't know that there's a company that's been at it longer than PayPal. So I feel good about them. But there too, I'm taking the precautions. I monitor that account, got multi-factor set up. I'm careful about the information that is held within PayPal. And lastly, on credit cards, this wasn't asked, but I'll mention it. I don't have nearly the concern I do using a credit card that I do using a debit card. So no one knows my debit card number. My debit card number isn't used anywhere other than the occasional ATM. And by the way, I don't even remember the last time I went to an ATM, to be honest. But that's the only place I'll ever use my debit card, and I'll use credit cards instead. I just feel that the fraud protection guarantees offered by credit cards, I have a higher degree of comfort there, and that's how I think about that. And then and maybe the last thing I'll mention, though this is not specific to online shopping, I like using the tap to pay functions when those are available. I don't like having to put my credit card or my debit card or any card into another device. I'd rather tap it on a point of sale, um, uh, you know, device, or these days I'm most often doing that with my iPhone, and that's how I control that. But those things give me greater comfort as well.
Yeah. We have quite a few questions about email, and this is a good lead-in because it is referring to PayPal as well. But Tamara asks, we often get emails from PayPal stating we owe an amount, usually hundreds of dollars, several times a week. Any way to stop these emails? We don't use PayPal.
Yes, and yes. So a couple things I want to call out here. What we're these emails should be treated as suspect. They sound like they're phishing to me. That's phishing with a PH, and that is a type of uh, cyber attempt, if you will, to get you to take action. It could be to call somebody on that email. It could be to click on a link. It could be to open an attachment. It could be to simply reply. So the best thing to do with those emails is to get them out of there. And I would tell you the best way to do that is, contrary to very popular thought, don't go straight to what might be an unsubscribe button at the very bottom of that email. Rather, when you see an email like that, you can drag it into your junk folder, you can drag it into your spam folder, and then going forward, they'll just all go there. And then as you look at that maybe once a week or whatever, you can delete what's in there. Most often, everything that goes to my junk folder is in fact junk and should be deleted. So that's how you want to handle that. But for Tamara here, and then also others, this is what I think is often the number one way that bad actors try to scam us, and that is they might send an email like that where they try to get you on the phone with them. So in this case, it was from PayPal regarding a balance that was due. By the way, if you ever have a question on that, you should close down the email and go to your PayPal account and log in. If you don't have a PayPal account, then you really don't have much to worry about. In that case, I would just ignore it. It's junk altogether. But I've also seen these emails look like antivirus subscriptions. I think I get some of those myself, every so often, where it tells me that $399 was charged to reinstate my antivirus subscription. Well, I don't use that provider for an antivirus subscription, so I know that it's junk. But in that case, you don't want to call that phone number on that email. If you really think you've been charged and you're worried about that, go to your credit card, check it out. Look there. That's who you'd want to call anyway, in the event that you were charged, on that. So you're better off just dragging those into your junk, and you can trust that once you drag them in there, your email system will do a pretty good job of doing that going forward. Now, I would say that if there's ever a situation where, as a result of getting a message like that, or something even remotely close to it, if you find yourself on the phone with somebody, if they are, number one, wanting to access your computer, if they want you to go out to a website and download an application that will allow you to share your screen with them, that should be treated as a red flag, and it's likely a fraudster or a bad actor trying to gain access to your account. You just hang up, on them there. If you're ever in a situation where whatever is happening, the solution is where they want you to go pick up gift cards from the grocery store and then give them the codes for those gift cards, that's a scam. You should hang up and involve somebody else in your family there to help you. But those are things you want to stay away from. But what all these have in common is they most likely or most often come from email. And by the way, in the cybersecurity area, we often call email cyber public enemy number one, or what is actually the greatest cyber threat to each and every one of us. And that's because it is a very cost-effective way for bad actors to get in touch with us. They can cast a an exceptionally wide net, and it costs them next to nothing to do that, to send over email. So it is, and continues to be the number one attack vector, if you will, for cyber criminals. So be very distrusting. I've often said with email, you want to think of everything that's in your inbox as if it's guilty. You want to treat it if it's guilty until you otherwise prove that it's innocent. And if there too, like I'd mentioned earlier, if you do that, you'll slow down a little bit. You'll give a chance for your instinct to kick in, and that'll be one of the best ways to keep bad actors out of your space.
Could you speak to a few things? So Susan asks a similar question, but looking at Microsoft emails, how do you discern if any of those emails are real or legit before opening it? What are some of those things you watch for as you're, trying to discern what is real?
Thank you, Susan. I'm going to tell you, it can be really, really hard. So I want you to know that the bad actors, they have been working on this for years. They have perfected their technique. And here's something I often share. When you think about bad actors, I don't want you to think about some loser hanging out in mom's basement in the dark. I want you to think giant call centers with managers and supervisors and performance reviews and conference rooms and filing cabinets. Like it's a business. There are even ways that you can buy fraudsters as a service and utilize their services. It's a real thing, out there. So know that they're really good. So with that in mind, it can be really hard to spot and understand the difference between what is a legitimate email and what is a malicious email. So what do you do in that case? In every case, so let's say I myself got an email today from Schwab, from Microsoft, from Apple. These are three big companies that I work with all the time. What am I going to do? Whatever the situation is, I'm going to close that email, set that aside, and then I'll go out to Apple's website or Amazon's website or Google or Schwab or whoever that is, and I'll log in from there. I'll never do that by clicking on a link within an email or opening an attachment in an email, unless it's a situation where I know it's coming. I've expected it. I'm working with my advisor and they say, hey, heads up, this is coming. Here's what you're going to do. That would be when I would trust an email, but something out of the blue, I wouldn't do that at all. Now, if you're careful, you can look through an email and spot things that will help you understand that they're off. So I start at the top and I work my way down. I look at the from address. You can hover over it and it will appear, what will appear is the actual real email address. And if it's something remotely different than what I was expecting, or instead of a nice short email address, it's something that's long, okay, it's probably a fraudster. So that's one area. I can look at how the email is titled in the subject line. I can look at how it's addressed to me. I can look at how words have been put together to make sentences. And I look for punctuation, like the basic things. But there too, if you look closely, sometimes there can be clues, but this is getting a lot more difficult to find. If there's a link in an email, if you're careful, you can hover over it without clicking on it. You can hover over it, and what it will show you most likely is where it's actually directing you. And again, if it looks like it's directing you somewhere very different than what you're expecting, that could be an indication that it's fraudulent. But those are all just tips and tricks and techniques. The best thing to do, close down the email, open your browser, type in the address of that provider, and then access their platform that way.
So Kristen asks even just the difference in email providers.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in security between those email providers?
There might be, but here too, I would say free isn't always the best. Let's look for commercial grade, popular, I'm well funded, providers out there, the big ones, and you know who they are. Those are the ones that I'm most comfortable using, for email on that. All of the same rules that we're talking about and all the same practices, they all still apply no matter what provider you're using. But when I'm thinking of an email provider, I'm thinking of that almost the same way I think of as like online shopping. I'm only using the big names that are out there, period. It's not worth it to me to go, to beyond that. And whether it's Apple, Google, or some of the other big ones out there, I think they do a fine job with their platforms.
She also asks, how do bad actors get your email address?
I would say they're going to do it. I'll give you a couple ways. One is through one of these breaches we hear about. So when you hear of you know a big data exfiltration that happens with one of these breaches, and they're capturing user IDs and passwords, well, very often a user ID is in fact our email address. Sometimes we don't even have much of a choice in the matter, and then sometimes that's where they get the password as well, because we reuse our passwords. That goes back to that best practice of don't reuse a password. So that could be one place that they get a user ID and password. It could be two. I've seen situations, and there's a phishing attempt that I've seen before where the bad actors will send an email to a user and it looks like it's coming from Apple or Google or Microsoft, and it says your account is locked. Click here to unlock your account. And it looks like it's coming from Microsoft. It's perfect. It's got logos and disclaimers and copyright and all of that. And even when you click on that link, it launches you out to a website that looks just like Microsoft. It's exactly what you'd expect, except that the entire thing's a sham. It's a cleverly cloned version of it. And then those users who enter in their user ID and password, well, they're giving their user ID and password to the bad actor who's sitting there just watching and collecting, that information there. So that might be another way. Maybe a third way, and I think I'm taking users down a path where it's like gets increasingly less likely, but it's still out there. There are computers, could be ours, could be computers that we're on, that have been infected with a malicious type of software called key logger technology. That's basically means it's capturing every keystroke that's entered on that computer and sending it overseas to a bad actor. That could be another way. And I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking about in the moment here, but those are some of the more common ways that email addresses are compromised and passwords.
Oh, another question on email. If you open your or your email in your browser, does that increase threats, security
No,
threats?
no, it doesn't. I appreciate that. It does not increase threats at all. In fact, you're using an encrypted connection, into your email account. No issue there at all. So that will be a less than desirable experience on a phone, a small mobile device, but on an iPad, a computer, it would work just fine on that. And I want to come back to one thing, and it might be from Kristen's question on email infiltration. Remember that one of the best things you can do to stop someone from getting into your email account is turn on multi-factor authentication. I mentioned it earlier, but given the question, it's worth mentioning it again, because in the event our user ID and password is compromised, that multi-factor is the only thing that's going to keep the bad actor out of the account, because they would need that code or that PIN or what have you. So this is something that everyone on the line can turn on right now in the security settings. It doesn't cost a thing, and it offers just exponentially more protection, to your online accounts. I turn it on everywhere.
All right, we've got a question from Marge on the impact of AI on financial industry. What we should be aware of and watching for?
Yeah, it's the AI, from my perspective, has been fascinating to watch. We're seeing that utility being used for good in many, many ways. And we're seeing a lot of people move faster and better and augment what they do today to great success and to great degrees. So there's a lot of positives come along with it. But as we've already heard, there's a lot of bad actors out there that are already harnessing the power of AI and using it against us. Now, I don't believe I know of a case here at Schwab where this has happened, but I've read about it, where generative AI, has been used to capture pieces of a person's voice, and then that has been used to create a sentence or to start a conversation with somebody that where the bad actor is able to pretend that they are that person. And we've read about situations where a family member might get a call and they're convinced that their son or daughter has been taken hostage, for example, and they hear their voice, but it's an AI generated voice on there. So a couple things on that, and that's just one example. But if you start going down the rabbit hole on this, you'll read there are um, all sorts of situations, all sorts of scenarios and stories, out there that will help you understand what's out there. In any case, I think what we do is no different. So first, and I've had conversations with folks in my own family about this. I've asked them to be suspect of any type of call that they get like that. That you shouldn't, your first initial reaction shouldn't be to trust that, out of the gate. Number one. Number two, I think one of the best things we can do if we ever receive that type of threat or that type of call is immediately involve somebody else. I'm a big advocate of your clients involving their advisor. And if there's even if it's just to get a second set of eyes on that, because sometimes someone who's coming in from the outside who doesn't think it's their son or daughter that's been taken hostage, they're going to be much more emotionally removed from that situation, and they'll be able to see things that those of us that are emotionally charged and tied to this, would miss. So that's one of the best things you could do is just involve others in that transaction. And then, instead of trusting who you might be on the phone with, hanging up, calling them back. Those are things we can do. But yeah, know that that's a real thing. And whether it's a person's voice, we've read situations of a person's image. We just need to know. So be advised, be informed that that's a thing, and to not trust it, and to be suspect out of the gate, involve somebody else. And those are two big keys to being better off as a result.
So similarly, kind of finding your information all over. Sherry asks about smartphone security. She has received text messages that are clearly phishing. Somebody logged on to her Amazon account from New Delhi, India, those kind of situations. But the question is, what should I be deleting, reporting as spam? What else could she be doing to be checking on those things?
Yeah, I think it sounds like she's doing what she can, on that. So when we receive those types of messages, again, being careful about how you interact with those types of communications is what's important. That and then turning on the types of functions that we talked about, even if it's within Amazon, multi-factor, on there. I mean, those would be ways that I'd be countering that. Was there a little more to the question there?
I guess
Try to answer
just
it.
those phishing were, asking for information from her. But it's just scary to receive those, I think. And you delete them
It
and
is.
report them in spam. But, was there more she could do?
No,
Someone else has asked, Joe, how can I get fewer spam emails and text?
yeah, there too. I think the behavior's the same. If you want fewer spam, move those junk and spam items into your spam folder. Remember, don't unsubscribe, just move them into your junk and spam folder. And then, like I said, once a week, you can delete all that. If personally, I got an email right now and it said that somebody in New Delhi had logged in my Amazon account, I would delete that email and I would log into my Amazon account and I would check it out and just make sure everything's okay. And there'd be a pretty good chance that everything's okay. And it was just a phishing, with a PH, a phishing email. And we are going to continue to get a lot of these. And every day I wake up to, in some cases, it's dozens of these types of things that are in my account. And most often they're just moving right into my junk folder, and I check them out and delete them. It can be alarming.
It is scary out there.
Yeah.
Ellen asks, what about using Facebook or Instagram? How to be safe when using those two programs?
Sure. I really appreciate this one from Ellen, because I do think, and I don't think it's something that we talk enough about. These types of platforms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever your children might be using, it sure seems like they're around to stay. And in some cases, it's a great way for folks to stay connected with friends and family and whatnot. But I think we could be really thoughtful and careful about how we use these tools. Things like I'm careful about what sort of friend requests I accept and how.
Abrupt way to end. But I would like to thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. We truly appreciate you taking the time to come. I hope that you're leaving here with a little more knowledge, practical steps, and confidence to protect your information. Like I mentioned, we'll be sending an email with the follow-up and the replay link. If you want, please share this with your family and friends. It's very valuable, and hopefully, the more we can protect people, that we want to share that as much as possible. I want to thank Adam for the time he spent with us, sharing his expertise. And on behalf of your financial advisor and Focus Financial, we truly appreciate the trust you place in us to support your financial goals. In this ever-changing world we live in, we know many people have questions. If you know someone who could benefit from speaking to a financial advisor, or even just getting a second opinion, your advisor would be happy to connect with them. With that, enjoy the rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you on future Focus events.